Good evening. My name is Ed Smith, and I'm not running for anything. But I am 60 years old, and I moved to this town when I was 3. And with the exception of 4 years that Uncle Sam took me away, I've been here all my life. And I now have concerns about my town. And I sat home this evening and I listened to some things that are hard for me to grasp and hard for me to understand. Mr. Ward, you mentioned, and you are correct, the wonderful job that the DPW did on this town hall. Your estimate is $100,000. Without the exception of Mr. Lake, taking Mr. Lake out of the equation, I think that estimate is grossly underestimated.
Absolutely.
And there was a point in time when Nina was on the other side of the dais, when she raised the exact question. She asked you one night, can you tell me how much money was spent in DPW funds here? And I sat where Mr. Ingrassia now sits, and I thought, finally, somebody's going to ask, because I happen to live right around the corner. The DPW is on 10-hour days. My wife and I would go by here Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, see people working. And Mr. Mulqueen's response to Ms. Nyman that evening was, don't worry about it. They're on the payroll anyway. I might have the quote a little bit off, and I might paraphrase, but I think that's the gist of his response. And I would hope that should there be some catastrophic event in the town in the near future, and that for some reason FEMA had to come here, that these town board members wouldn't say to FEMA, you don't have to reimburse us for the good work that these people did from the DPW. They're on the payroll anyway. And what's the point? The point is that Mr. Lippert has a shortfall. He can't go out and pave roads. He can't go out and seal roads. And the reason he can't do that is that the general fund has never paid back the highway, which I believe is illegal, for all the money that was expended at this town hall. It should have been a general fund expenditure, not a highway expenditure. And when you quote $8.2 million, I think you are deceiving members of the public. It's not $8.2 million. It's $8.2 million plus, and I guarantee you Mr. Lippert has the number somewhere, every single dollar that was paid to highway workers at this town hall. Now next, I heard people mention a plan. We're working on a plan. Tell me, whose plan was it to give the caterer at the golf course $40,000 of taxpayers' money to make improvements at the golf course? Whose plan was it several years ago? And I don't know the exact year, but Mr. Ward, I'm sure you would, because you're active in the Little League. When you bought infield clay to the Howard Drive Little League field, and everybody was strutting around town that they had the same clay at the infield that they had in Yankee Stadium, and when I said in passing to a member of this town board that it's my understanding that they spent $65,000 on the infield clay, same as Yankee Stadium, I was told, oh no, you must be kidding. It's closer to $90,000. No bid, and the beauty of it is that you had a member of the Little League board at Howard Drive signing for the trucks, not even a town employee. Whose plan was that? Let's talk about legal fees and lawsuits that you're faced with. I remember sitting with members of this board when Fairways sued the town for the very first time, going back to when Mr. Rosenstein was town attorney, and they sued because they were denied entry into the sewer district. Mr. Rosenstein asked me for a reason. I told him plainly he had no reason. He advised members of that board, and I acknowledge that that is not this board, that there was no reason we could not defend the lawsuit, walk away. But the board chose to pursue it, and they denied Fairways the sewer district extension. Then there was a meeting with another town attorney, who happened to be the attorney to the water and sewer district, in which members of this board, Mr. Ward, you were one, Mr. Valentin, you were one, Mr. King, you were one, when that lawyer and I sat before this board and told you, do not appeal this, we cannot win this, because just as the first time we didn't have a reason or a justification for denying the sewer district, when we go to appeal, we still won't have a justification. And what happens? This board, in its wisdom, and Mr. Ward, I'll give you the benefit, you sign an appeal, but Mr. Valentin, Mr. King.
Mr. Smith, you should not be discussing matters that were discussed with the board, with the attorneys, because you are in danger of waiving attorney-client privilege for this town board, and you are jeopardizing the town. I urge you to stop.
Okay, then I'll stop. I'll stop. But I can talk about, I'm assuming, and I'll rely on your expertise, I'm assuming that I can talk about what happened in that case after the settlement.
It depends what you're going to say.
His time is up.
Well, I can remember, again, sitting where Mr. Ingrassia now sits, being here after the settlement was on, and if I go somewhere, stop me, because I don't want to be in threaten any privilege here. But I can remember sitting there where Mr. Ingrassia was, and after the town agreed to settle, I forget exactly what the number was, then the same members of the board carrying on about how the legal system was bad, and this was bad, and blah, 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 blah. And the fact of the matter is that we never should have gotten there. Now, let's talk about the sale of the town hall. When, again, I was sitting where Mr. Ingrassia was, and Mr. Ward came to me and said, we're going to borrow a couple $1 million because we didn't sell Echo Lake. I said, I don't think you can do that. I don't think it's the right thing to put the tax burden of the entire town simply on those people who live in the water and sewer district.
Excuse me, Mr. Smith,
Sure.
your time is up.
Oh, well, that's nice. Well, let me just repeat, since some people here tonight have had a little extension of time, let me just say that you blew Echo Lake, and then what do? You turn around 1 year later, and you do the exact same thing with the town hall. You couldn't sell Echo Lake. You had to borrow money from the water district. 1 year later, you make the exact same mistake. How can the people in this town trust you to come up with a plan if you continue to repeat your mistakes? Thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate it, and have a good night.